Welcome to another A Tippling Philosopher video. Hopefully you might recognise that there's a little bit of a change today because I have a brand new webcam that is hopefully recording, unfortunately for you, this face in perfect HD, or at least a better HD than I previously had. And that'll be better for interviews and videos in general. So I hope this is a step up in the world of YouTube. What am I going to talk to you about today? Well, the primacy of the free will argument. Now, you may or may not know that I have written an awful lot on free will and done a few videos on it, but and indeed given public talks on the subject. So I deny the existence of something called libertarian free will. So what is libertarian free will? Well, it's the real ability to consciously and rationally choose otherwise in a given situation. And what that means is that in any scenario, an agent can choose one way or another way. And one way of being able to sort of visualize this or understand it is with the thought experiment of making a decision and rewinding the world back to that same point. So you have this situation where you make a choice at 9:15 on a Tuesday morning to make a cup of tea, okay? And then you allow the world to go on for another 10 minutes, half an hour, and then you rewind the world back to that same moment, such that the moment is the same. I mean, you could see it as two identical worlds, but you have this causal circumstance where everything is identical to the first run through. First run through where I choose to make a cup of tea. The second run through is actually the same world because you just rewound. So nothing is different down to every wave function in existence. The libertarian free willer believes that somehow I could make a decision other than what I did. So I could make a decision not to make a cup of tea or to make a different drink. And the problem there being, what would underwrite that decision since the entire universe would be identical? It looks nothing other than random. To be able to choose otherwise means that that decision is not grounded in anything to do with the world, because the world is identical, yet the decision is different. So it can't be anything to do with the world that's grounded in that decision, and it only looks like random. And this is, I mean, I won't go into all the science about free will, but just philosophically, the notion of libertarian free will, this principle of alternative possibilities, if you don't have random or quantum, which doesn't really help the free willer because it's not conscious or rational, but if you have random, maybe you can get a different outcome. So you rewind the world, and introduce some random component or variable, and you might get a different outcome. But if you don't have random, then the outcome is going to be the same. So I deny free will. And there are lots of other reasons, particularly scientific and evidential reasons, why I think that is the case as well. But I deny free will. Now, what I really want to say today is this is incredibly important to discussions on religion, or about religion and concerning God. You cannot have a judgmental God and a denial of free will. And this is because if you're going to do what you're going to do in the situation you're in, because you are who you are, then punishing someone for making a given choice is somewhat problematic. In fact, praise and blame, technically speaking, are slightly incoherent. And so for God to say, I'm going to punish you with hell or reward you with heaven based on your decision, when your decision, you had no control over that at the moment of making that decision, because you are reacting to the environment you're in, given the person you are. So if you want a different outcome, you need to change the way you are. You need to have been a different person, or you need to have been in a different environment or situation. So therefore, judgmental God doesn't make sense in light of a denial of libertarian free will. And I could expand on these ideas a great deal, but I don't really want to go into great detail about that, because I just want to express this one thing really, and that is that the God argument, whether God exists or not, and by this I mean a judgmental God, a personal judgmental God that people normally believe of a God, rather than say a Calvinist God that is deterministic, exists in a deterministic reality. But if you are to want to argue for the more commonly understood idea of God, classical theism, an omni God that judges you, then this supervenes on libertarian free will existing. What that means is that it depends upon libertarian free will. If you don't have libertarian free will, that version of God makes no sense. So we can argue all we like about what this says in the Bible, what this says in the Quran, what this says about X, Y, and Z, the ontological argument, this, the that, the whatever, all these different arguments. But if you can't successfully and robustly establish libertarian free will, that version of God is invalidated. It's built upon the foundations of libertarian free will. And libertarian free will, no philosopher has been able to establish libertarian free will plausibly and adequately. It's that sort of the holy grail of philosophy would be to establish libertarian free will, but it's not viable philosophically or evidentially, and that's just a real problem. So when I give my talks on free will, I start off with, this whole argument is more important than the God argument, because if you can't establish this argument, you're going to have a real problem establishing your version of God, unless you're a Calvinist. So that's really what I wanted to say today. It's not the longest video, and I'm not going into great deal of depth with regard to free will, and indeed the versions of God that you can have, other than to say a judgmental God and free will are incompatible. And this is why free will philosophers, or philosophers who deny libertarian free will, who are playing around with these ideas, people like Greg Caruso, Dirk Pereboom, they're over the question of whether free will exists or not. They're like, right, libertarian free will does not exist, but where do we go from here? Like, what do we do with this? And now it becomes all about moral responsibility. Does that exist? What do we do with crime and punishment? How does this work on a daily basis? How does it impact our policies in government? How does it impact our moral lives? That's where the argument and the debate and the philosophical analysis should be, because the libertarian free will is a broken concept. Then what? So when you look at prisons, you start moving away from retribution. So prisons can be a kind of proxy for heaven and hell. You say, okay, we understand why this person ended up in prison because of who they were and the situation they were in. So going forward, what can we do about the situation people are in poverty and education? What can we do about individual people and producing causal circumstances where people don't commit these crimes? So, and then we also need to look into, well, how do we stop these people who have committed a crime how do we stop them committing it again? So recidivism rates. So prisons become about rehabilitation. When you deny free will, it's less about retribution and more about rehabilitation. So again, to map that back to a judgmental God, heaven and hell aren't about rehabilitation. You appear to be there for eternity. Most conceptions of heaven and hell. And that, again, is hugely problematic for me, because it should be about rehabilitation. What's the point of God with the divine foreknowledge, knowing that someone's going to sin and create them anyway, and then commit them to hell for eternity without the chance of being able to turn that around? It's morally abhorrent in my books. So I think we can learn from how we deal with prison incarceration and crime and punishment in philosophy with the denial of libertarian free will to better understand how incoherent the notion of a judgmental God is, and the idea of the incoherence of heaven and hell as well. Anyway, there you go. Please like and subscribe. I'm almost at 1,000 subscribers. That's fantastic. And please, share videos and whatnot. But just, have a chat about this in the comments. Think about it. How am I wrong? If I'm wrong, please let me know, and I can revise my theories and my opinions. But as ever, question everything.